Okay, this
Okay,
meeting
I
is
think we've got everybody pretty much here, so I think we will get started. As we've said in the past, we're doing this Zoom because of the limitations as a result of the virus. And you all should have received a draft copy, the latest draft copy of or could look it up on the sheriff's website, of the plan. Please be informed. I do appreciate everybody accommodating my schedule from moving the meeting from last night till tonight. I had a conflict out of town, which I could not get out of. With that said, are there any comments or that you'd like to make this time before we get started?
I would just like to say thank you to everybody that took part in this. I really appreciate the information and the sharing of information and the constructive criticism and suggestions and so forth. I think it was a good process. So thanks to everybody, and I hope we can continue this.
Thank you, Sheriff. We appreciate your openness and willing to work with us. Before we get started, I have roughly 3 questions that came through to me, either through the email or just people stopping me and asking questions. And I thought we'd just walk through those questions first and go from there. But the first one is not really a question, but it came up in the last 2 to 3 weeks. I've had a number of conference Zoom calls statewide. And one of the issues that always comes up is that we have to remember we are making recommendations, not a plan. The state in some places refers to it as a plan, some places recommendations. The only way it could become a plan is obviously the sheriff has the responsibility along with the county legislature, assuming there may be funding issues and other issues. The number of aspects of a plan we never even delve into: union contracts, schedules, so on and so forth. But anyways, I think it's important to make sure everybody understands that we are not doing a plan for the Genesee County Sheriff's Department. We are making recommendations based on what we have learned. And I don't know if anybody else want to comment on that, but I think it is an important point going forward, and which will be definitely, noted in our final report. So that said, I got a couple of questions. I'm just going to ask the sheriff, and then he can respond to them. The first one that we had was concerning quote unquote mutual aid, not the strict mutual aid, for instance, like the fire departments have, but mutual aid between other counties, state police, etc. Example being here in Bergen, where in Troop A barracks is our troop, it being in Genesee County. Within 2 miles is a substation for Troop E out of Canandaigua, and how that is coordinated if something was happening here in Bergen. So I just asked the sheriff to comment on that for a moment.
There we go. We do have mutual aid agreements with the village of Leroy and the city of Batavia for happenings here in in Genesee County. We don't have any mutual aid agreements with surrounding counties or in particular state police. However, in life and death situations or crimes in progress, we all work together. For instance, and same thing with surrounding counties. It would not be unusual in a situation that might be right on the border to ask Monroe County for help, or ask the troopers out of, I believe it's Troop E, if I remember correctly, for assistance. Back a few years ago, we had that incident out on Selden Road where the individual set his house on fire and also went down the street and murdered a neighbor. For instance, we called in Monroe County's SWAT team at that time to give us assistance. So while we don't have mutual aid agreements, it's a common practice across law enforcement for neighboring counties or neighboring agencies to lend assistance in those situations of, particularly when there's life and death situations or crimes in progress.
Bill, I got a question for you. As far as is mutual aid between two counties? You said there isn't one in place, and it's not really necessary, especially in life and death situations. Is it uncommon? I mean, or have you heard of mutual aid between other counties? Because I know, again, the request, the information request that was sent in from the citizen was asking about travel time to the village of Bergen, and he was listing out the time for outside agencies to make it instead of waiting for the sheriff's office. And so I guess I'm just curious if you've heard, if you were to, if it's something that's uncommon. They were referencing mutual aid, how there is for the fire services. And I know I'm glad to hear that in life and death situations that there are no borders, that law enforcement responds. But as far as something that's in the middle of the road, not life or death, is it something you've heard of, or is it really not anything that's really practiced anywhere else?
I've never actually heard of mutual aid agreements between like county sheriff's offices or county and the state police. I think it's just a common practice that, like I said, life and death situations or crimes in progress. Say you had a burglary in progress, and their closest car was, much closer than ours, and obviously we would reach out for assistance to at least get there and handle the situation until we get on the scene. You do have boundary restrictions on Monroe County's authorities in Monroe County, not saying that they can't bleed over in our county a little bit. And again, with the state police, they have statewide jurisdiction, and but for the most part, within your jurisdiction, you handle those calls. But it's like I say, it's not uncommon for in life and death situations or crimes in progress to seek assistance on those outside borders, from neighboring counties, Erie County, Niagara County, Wyoming, Livingston, and Monroe. So, I've never really called it mutual aid or heard it referred to as mutual aid. It's just, assisting other officers and other police agencies.
Thanks, Bill.
Again, that wouldn't be something, Matt, on a routine call. So you have a burglary that occurred last night, and then they're right on the border, that we would look to, Livingston or adjoining county to go handle the call. That's I've never heard of anything like that.
Okay.
It's those situations where they need immediate attention that you would rely on whoever you can get to get to that scene to preserve life or apprehend suspects or criminals.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Other comments or questions on that issue? The second question that came through is on mental health response, et cetera. And again, Sheriff, if you'd comment on that and the work that you've been doing.
On mental health calls, currently we have, I believe it's 5 individuals that have been through the extensive training of crisis intervention team. And as recently as this past week, they offered a scaled down version, again, a Zoom version of training on dealing with those individuals that are in mental health crises. It's becoming more and more well known that the police aren't necessarily the ones that need to respond to these calls, except when there's violence or whatever. That educating the individual and the families on the services that are available out there and avenues that they can take other than law enforcement. That's what we're trying to work with those individuals and the families. I'm not saying that that we won't respond, especially in situations with volunteer fire departments when they have to go. They do request that we go with them just to make sure that the scene is safe and secure. But the main thing is to try to address the underlying issues that are leading up to this mental health crisis. We work close with JACASA, and we also work very well with the Genesee County Mental Health and Mental Health Association here in Batavia, and also with the Rochester MIT team. But we do recognize, I think across all law enforcement, that this is an area of great concern and that we need to work on and educate our law enforcement officers on better techniques for handling the situations and the availability of services that are out there to help address the underlying needs. These individuals are not necessarily criminals. They don't need to wind up in jail. They need to wind up in a situation where they can get the help that they need.
Thank you. We've discussed this considerably. Others would like to comment on this, or the inquiry came in? I don't know, Matt, did other members of the task group get copies of those two questions that came in, which we just went through?
Yes,
So
I
they've
forwarded
all
them on
seen
Bill.
that.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments on that, please? The last question is one that did not come in that way, but has been raised to me personally a couple, 2 or 3 times, and it concerns police review boards, whether or not the county had one and whether or not it ever considered or recommendation. We discuss it in a way in page 5 of the report, where we talk about the activities of the sheriff's department, etc. But the bottom line is we haven't identified any real need for it to have one that I can say is former county legislator and chairman of the legislature. I can guarantee you that if we had had a lot of problems in that area or any problems in that area, I would have heard about it. And the former sheriff is here and the current sheriff. And I was on a legislature with both gentlemen and they were, in the office. So I don't personally see where that is a significant problem and there should be set up. But I would appreciate if anybody else had any other comments or thoughts on that.
If I may comment,
Please.
you're right. I don't see a need at this point in time. In the future, maybe if there's situations that arise that require, would call for such a review board. But, if the sheriff, if they follow the general orders outlined by the Division of Criminal Justice Services, then you should be okay, because there's a policy and procedure in place. If there's a complaint against an officer, then it has to be followed up on. That officer is disciplined or dismissed, depending on the situation. So, to call in a review board, I can see these in the metropolitan areas where they have issues, with certain officers, but in a small community like this, I personally, at this time, don't see a need for one.
Any other comments or thoughts on this?
I would agree with Sheriff Mayha, that at this point in time, I don't believe it calls for a review board. Again, in the future, if that problem should arise, then obviously I would never be opposed to it. But right now, I don't think it's really called for. And, one other thing I'd like to point out is, as being sheriff and being an elected official, that I am under review. Our department is under review, and we answer to the citizens, and that takes place during the election every 4 years. I'm very open to, like I say, constructive criticism, suggestions, and I think at this point, the limited amount of complaints that we actually do receive, I don't think it really warrants a citizen review committee at this time.
Any other input on that? Okay, thank you. That were the main things that I come to me over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Unless somebody else has had some new things, there is one other last issue which we just learned about this afternoon. Matt and myself, or Matt learned about it, and he was nice enough to pass it on to me. But as far as questions, citizen input, just people on the street that have stopped, talked to you or something, or observations, I'd very much appreciate hearing them now. Okay. With that said, one of the things that came out today, why don't you discuss it, Matt, and then I will say how I attempt to rectify, do it.
Yeah, so I was watching a NISAC, New York State Association of Counties, Zoom presentation today from a panel, and they were discussing the police reform reports that we're putting together right now, and indicating that most municipalities should be in the stage that we are in, where the draft is out, and now they're just receiving some additional feedback, and then preparing for their respective municipality to adopt the recommendations at their March meeting at some point. So they were covering certain things, like there's a form that we have to make sure that's signed off on and certified, and kind of some housekeeping items. But one thing that I hadn't seen in a previous Zoom or anything was that the report has to list, I think it's 13 or 14 points. It literally has to list that we considered those 14 points. And the good news is that we have, we had every one of the items was covered as an agenda item. The vast majority of them had a good amount of presentation material that supported them. We had Kathy Yulee from Genesee Justice present on one of the items. We had Julie Carousel present on one of the items. We had the chief deputies present. We had, and then the majority of the rest were taken care of by the sheriff and the undersheriff. So we did cover all of the points, but they weren't specifically laid out and addressed in our report. Our report right now is more focused on the outcomes that we came up with, which is logical, and I think it's good to have in the report and to have that report based on that. But the fact that we don't list out the items that we gave consideration to would be grounds for our report to get rejected. So at this point in time, I think that it's not a major lift for us to make sure that we include this verbiage in the report. And talking with the city, Earl Wells, who's working with the city and preparing their report, and I kind of wanted to get his thoughts as another person that's preparing a report. We kind of spitballed a little bit, and I mentioned what Bob and I had talked about earlier. As far as, so what we're going to do is basically Bob is going to go back and he's going to list out on a separate page appendix or an extra add-on to the report, and it's going to basically list out all the points, the dates that we covered them, the presenters, and then maybe make some notes. That part is, some of the stuff was later than others, so that's not as important. But the important part is that we are going to basically list the dates, the items that we covered, and the presenters, so that at least we cover that part of the report requirements. So it's a matter of, I'm glad we caught it. We did do the work, just a matter of making sure that the report reflects it. And that came out of that presentation today, where the presenter was very clear, saying that this would be grounds for the report to, in essence, be rejected if we didn't include it.
So my thought is, just before the meeting started, we found out this. So over the next few days, I will take that information and lay it out. And I'm assuming I'm making an attachment. And then if there's something specific, maybe a sentence or two, and then possibly refer back to the page where it may have a recommendation or something. But I don't really feel, trying to rewrite the whole report at this point is not going to happen. And a couple of times over the last month, the state has come out with these things suddenly that we're supposed to be doing, and we'll do the best we can at this point. So that will be happening. The bad point is, unfortunately, we're going to have another meeting in order to approve the report. And I would like to schedule that meeting for next Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock, same as this week. Hopefully it would not be very long. It would just be, that would be March 2nd. I would do it on a Monday evening, but I got another one of these meetings out of town I've got to be to. And hopefully we'd have it out. If not Friday, definitely Monday. Everybody can look over that new attachment. And we could then approve it at that meeting and then send it on to public service, which I believe meets on the 17th. Is that the date? No, excuse me, on the 15th.
Yep.
So we'd make the 15th public service meeting off to the full, Ways and Means on the 17th. And then the full legislature would have it presented on the 24th of March. And we're done. So that's kind of the schedule we're on right now. Sorry about this extra point just came up like literally this afternoon. Matt called me about them, so. Okay, hopefully. Is next Tuesday at 6, is that any real problem with that? I mean, it should not be a long meeting unless there's something really that people want to object to. And if anybody wants to make comments on the actual body of the report or anything further, things should be clarified, please send them over to me. I will get them in there. So, okay. Is there anything else this evening that we wish to discuss or comment on or follow up on? Okay. Well, again, I thank everybody for their patience with me and changing the date. And I look forward to seeing you all next week, hopefully for the last time. And we can get this done and wrapped up and out of here. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.